Her Excellency Ambassador Elena Poptodorova, thank you again for the honor of coming to the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy and for the excellent lecture you gave. We would like to ask you a few follow-up questions and to go a little deeper into some of the issues. What do you think are the benefits for the EU in strengthening its ties with the US? How can the EU use this relationship to its advantage?
This is a two-way street. It's beneficial for both the European Union and the United States of America. And it is a tested partnership. It is a relationship which started many years ago. It existed, it went through different stages in history, European history and world history. It, so to say, survived the tests of time and the trials of time. And here it is today in an entirely new international environment, again opting for a higher level of quality of this partnership. It is a strategic, indispensable, and irreplaceable relationship. It is getting more complicated, not easier, also because maybe of an expanded membership on the part of the EU, also because of the intention of both the United States and the European Union to go deeper and broader, and that always means more complicated talks, more complicated negotiations. But the two sides of the Atlantic are so interwoven between each other in terms of jobs. We have 10 million plus jobs between the two sides of the Atlantic, between the European Union and the United States of America. Many businesses are headquartered one side or the other side. Lately, which is not good for the European Union, but it is a fact, it's a trend. Some of the big businesses are practically moving out to the US because of the lower production costs, which has to do with the dramatically reduced price of natural gas. So there is vested interest on both sides. When we use the, I would call it rather overused phrase of common values, this is actually true because it comes down to the way that two entities do business, rule of law, cultural aspects of the life of individual countries and the European Union in general. So there is no closer partner for either the United States of America or the European Union than, respectively, the other side. And I think that both sides appreciate very much the benefits they get, the short-term and long-term benefits. This is why the negotiations were opened on July 8th for the signing of an even deeper going agreement, that for transatlantic free trade zone, which will further cement this relationship.
Thank you for your answer. We already talked about the youth and its importance. And the following question would be, do you think that close bonds between the EU and US would encourage a more effective approach to youth development in the EU?
Again, I think it's beneficial for both sides. There are some good practices which can be looked at in America and can be, if not automatically, at least in an adapted fashion, introduced in Europe. It has to do mostly with the type of education, liberal arts, especially when there are several liberal arts institutions in the European Union, including Bulgaria, which is a very, very specific branch of higher education, which first started in the US. Then, given this tendency of, as I say, tighter relations economically also between the two countries, it is important that young people are interchangeable, so to say, and that young Americans would come and work in Europe and young Europeans will go and work in America. Right now, this is not so easy in terms of working in America. This is where the European Union should probably negotiate more firmly. It has to do with a very complicated process of acquiring a visa, working visa, so to say, work visa. At this point in time, what is realistic, and it is happening, but I believe it should be further expanded, is academic exchange. There are these programs abroad, both from European universities and from American universities, which is culturally extremely useful to individual students, college students, but also to developing this bigger knowledge and understanding. That's the other key, understanding between both the US and the EU.
Thank you very much. And another question. What investments can be made to enrich the lives of young people? Can you give examples or ideas on how these investments could benefit youth culture and education?
Unless there is a solid and consistent government policy in education and investment in education, there won't be a visible and sizable result as far as the European Union is concerned. What is needed in the EU, and this is why I mentioned earlier the 2020 strategy with the special emphasis on youth education and youth employment. What is needed is to rearrange the EU budget, I think, and reallocate more funds for supporting even specific educational establishments. That's what I would think would be good. Not just a general policy which may be well rooted in Brussels, and I'm not sure how much of that will be felt in the individual countries, but let's say supporting directly even some certain universities, which of course will undergo some process of certification and approval. But the European Union must go beyond Brussels, leave Brussels in a direct way, rather than leaving this sphere entirely to national governments and only having the guidelines or the directives agreed in Brussels, which afterwards need to be implemented by the national governments. I think a double effort is needed, nationally and on the union level. Another thing which can be done, and I believe in that a lot, is support from foundations, from donors. Yes, this is a US practice, but it has proven to be extremely successful. Again, different systems, different attitudes, different mentality, but one of the things which I particularly liked about this attitude, I would say, in the United States is the, it's not even a responsibility, although it may sound like that, but it's the desire to give back. Two magic words which I learned: to share and give back. So all this, those who have the alumni system, those who have graduated from a college or from a school even, everybody contributes a little something to his own educational institution. And this is to give back, because of course the schools, they take very good care of, not all of them, of course, it's always wrong to generalize, but it's kind of a very much interconnected system. They try to provide good education to their students, and the students then really feel it as the most natural thing to do, to give back. So that's, as I say, a mentality that probably we need to stimulate and have more tightly knit communities in our schools and universities. Again, something which I find very different, and I'm almost envious. They would keep track of all those who attended the schools or the colleges, and they always write, there is somebody, they change, of course, it's kind of a committee or something that they all write back to their alumni. They organize alumni get-togethers, and then the alumni, depending on whether they are already working or not, but they also help. So that's another system to also, that cultivates a sense of responsibility, your own responsibility. It may be $10, $20, but just the very fact that you're helping your school and other next generation, other students. But that's separate. That's for you to work on. That's not about government policy. This is about young people themselves to do it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And that leads me to the next question, which is, do current education systems around the world prepare the youth population for success in the future? And do you know of any examples where education is a big factor in producing prosperous individuals?
I think education is always a big factor. I think that the exceptions are few and they prove the rule. But that's in principle. Then we have to look into the situations in each individual country. Because no matter what, and we're talking now of the European Union, but and the role it can play as an entity, but at the end of the day, all adult generations have responsibility to their young generations. So we shouldn't look farther than our own home country with regard to how the education system works. And I think we, the parents, have a responsibility, and you, the kids, the students, have your own. Of course, it's not always your fault if the education doesn't come out as all of us want it to. And this is where the role of governments and parliament comes in. I'm afraid that in many countries we've been negligent, busy with the very big political challenges. We were rather negligent regarding the state of affairs in education. Or oftentimes education has fallen victim to political expediency, which is the worst that can happen. It should be taken out and above. It's above every possible expediency, because this is what gives you the future of the whole nation, of the whole country. So again, back to a question, always education is a special asset. And every educated person has a lot more advantages than those who didn't have the privilege of being educated properly.
Thank you.
And the final question, could you sum up your views on whether a close transatlantic link between EU and US correlates the need for investment in youth and education?
I think I've more or less answered your question in more words. Yes, and if we do have this, especially I'm thinking now if, and hopefully soon, this agreement, TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade Agreement, is finalized and adopted, that would mean a very expanded economic and business relationship between the two countries. And as I said, since the companies are practically a shared endeavor, I don't even know of a big American company, of a corporation not having branches in Europe or even being headquartered there, and the other way around. All big European companies are there. So that inevitably means manpower, inevitably means need for workers at all levels. And what you need there is educated workforce. Educated workforce, this is the biggest challenge for the future. And educated workforce only happens through a good system of education.
Ambassador Poptodorova, thank you very much for your time, and it was an honor and privilege to have you here with us. Thank you.
As
Thank
I
you
said,
very
it was all my pleasure all along. Remember, cultural diplomacy has more challenges than solutions, as I mentioned earlier, but it's worthwhile engaging in. So whatever you do in your ordinary lives, in your usual lives, when you don't have this very special experience of being with ICD, just remember that everything comes down to a kind of cultural diplomacy. Good
Thank
luck
you
to
very
you.
much.
Good luck to you.